societies get richer, so they have more resources to dedicate towards things like cleaning up the environment. While people are in poverty, they can't do that. And as societies get richer and richer, so they get more and more determined to get things cleaner and cleaner. You know, here we are in London. Had we been here in the 1850s, you would have gone for a walk by the river. People would get off the station at Waterloo. They would be vomiting at the stench of sewage, effluent, of bodies floating past in the Thames. It was called the Great Stink. This terrible miasma of foulness that would accumulate around London. And then a guy called Sir Joseph Bazalgette invented this thing called the sewage system. He built the embankment and created this new, cleaner river. The Thames has been getting cleaner and cleaner over the year, regardless of government legislation, because this is what free citizens do. It's an absolute fact. It's not, this is an unchangeable truth about human beings. We don't like living in shit. I don't buy this line from environmentalists that there are all these cackling villains in business who, left to their own devices, would pollute the air more and more. People are responsible to shareholders. People don't get knocked sideways by people if they're thought to be polluting. You don't need these government regulations telling them not to do it. There's a pressure anyway from the market, from people.
Boy,
We just don't know. That's why you're just slave to the prejudices of the age. People don't know this stuff because they don't read, they don't think. And I'm sorry to have a go at you personally, but it matters. It really does. We've got to be educated out of this widespread meme which has been spread by environmentalists that somehow man, when not bossed around by big government, will always do the wrong thing. I don't believe that. Our tendency is to do the right thing. I'm not saying that all forms of government environmental legislation are absolutely wrong in every case. No, of course I'm not. But what I am saying is that it is not just government, enlightened government, which cares about the environment and the rest of us don't. Of course, if people are polluting rivers, pouring their effluent in the river, then they ought to pay some kind of price for this, because they are using, it's the tragedy of the commons, is it? They're using a valuable resource and they're treating it as their own to dump their waste in. Well, you can't have that. I think that one of the great propaganda victories, which has been won by the environmental movement, and it's a complete lie, is to make out that people who are not kind of ardent members of Greenpeace protesting against power stations and so on must therefore be evil polluters who want to plunder the Earth's resources and make it a worse place. It simply isn't the case. We like living in a clean world. We like clean rivers. We like fresh air to breathe. I think it's part of it. You look at literature. I studied literature at Oxford. One of the recurring themes in literature is the idea of the ubi sunt, the idea that there was a golden age just in the distant past when everything was more pastoral and more lovely, and you see it in all these pastoral poems and stuff. You see poets referring back to this golden age when people frolicked in fields and they were all carefree and the air was clean and rivers teemed with fish and so on. It's a natural human urge to go back to the Garden of Eden. We are not facing a crisis about anthropogenic global warming, and that's the key issue. Is it a crisis or not? I think one of the problems with this debate is it's got bogged down in the level of so you are admitting that man has an influence on climate change, are you? Because you just talked about the urban heat island effect, and you were saying, well, that's an influence, isn't it? So now you're saying there is man-made global warming after all. Look, please. This tit-for-tat stuff that goes on in the blogosphere all the time is entirely irrelevant. The question is this: is the warming that is taking place now, is the degree to which man is influencing it catastrophic or not? Are bad things going to happen because of us? And the answer is quite simply no. Bad things are not going to happen because of us. Therefore, the whole regulatory and fiscal edifice that's being erected by governments around the world to deal with this problem is money entirely wasted. That's the issue. Huge. The taxpayer is being presented with the biggest bill in history in the name of dealing with a problem that does not, to all intents and purposes, exist. Of course, man has a tiny role to play in climate change. No one's disputing that. No one's seriously disputing that, because when you think about it, of course, even when you light a candle in a house, that has an effect. So in the same way, yeah, of course, CO2 probably has kind of some small influence, but the percentage of CO2 that's produced by man is very small anyway. But one gets bogged down in these arguments. They are entirely irrelevant. What matters is what's being done to combat climate change, and that's where the problems begin. Watermelons, green on the outside, red on the inside. I've looked at the whole story of how the man-made global warming argument developed over the years. How, for example, it was limited in the 1950s and 60s to a very small number of people. Remember, this was the time when people were worrying about the Ice Age. A guy named Bert Bolin, a Swedish guy, was very much involved in agitating for action to be taken. And slowly this snowball effect happened where the UN got involved, and once the UN gets involved, then the gravy train really starts beginning. And this massive funding program went into funding scientists to do this vital research into man-made global warming, and so it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the memes spread, and it was taught in the schools as fact, even though it's not fact, it's just conjecture. And businessmen started moving in, sensing which way the wind was blowing, and so forth. We are now reaching the point. I mean, Cancun, I think, will mark the death knell of man-made climate change. Copenhagen was certainly pretty near the death knell. The environmental movement will move on to a new scare, just like in the 80s we had acid rain that went away when it was discovered to be a myth. Now we've got man-made global warming. In the future it'll probably be biodiversity or alien invasion, something like that.